What's going on? Are you ready? We're going to get into Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Let's talk about it. Okay, so as much as I didn't want this movie, I have to say that I came away from the experience feeling mostly positive about it. We'll start with the pros. So, Anya Taylor-Joy, obviously, she's amazing and everything. So, if you're going to pick someone to be a younger Furiosa, there's a lot of options, but and each one of them will probably yield strong results. I don't know who else might have been on the short list for it, but Anya Taylor-Joy is pretty. She's impressive. Generally speaking, it seemed like she would do well in the role. But Chris Hemsworth obviously is the star to me. Like, he steals the show. There's something to be said for Hemsworth's ability to really let loose, and it's not something you see often because of the roles you associate him with, particularly with Thor, or even his character from the Extraction movies. But there are rare occasions where he can lean into some fun and some humor. I think my examples are Ghostbusters, the 2016 version of Ghostbusters. I'm not quite sure how many people saw that movie, but I liked Chris Hemsworth in that movie. It was a good. I think it was a good departure. I think from what I was used to seeing him in. Speaking of Thor, though, I think the latter Thor movies, particularly with and also Infinity War. I think particularly Infinity War is probably some of his strongest acting in the Thor movies. I think, and he has such a range, and he's much more. He's decidedly more serious in that movie. You really get to see some dynamicism from him, playing the. He's kind of a tortured hero in that movie, and he is on a mission. He's lost everything, and now he's trying to do what he can to feel like he can set things right to the extent that he can, given everything's all messed up. I think if you want to look at least from what my experiences of watching some of his movies, to give a layperson, sort of a crash course in good Hemsworth roles that hit different beats. I would say Ghostbusters 2016. I would say Avengers Infinity War, and I would say this movie, Furiosa, because he really has he's really funny, and he seems like he's just having a lot of fun, and that's cool to see in this movie, when you can, especially when you look at it against Fury Road, which tonally is decidedly more weighty, and there's some humor in it, but the amount of the characters aren't allowed too much to engage in levity. But in this movie, Chris Hemsworth, I would say, is the comic relief. He also provides a certain degree of menace. He's threatening. He's a solid. And you feel for him a little bit too. There's a tragedy about him. He's also lost. Mostly everybody in this world has probably lost something in some form, given the state of everything. Everything's just all into chaos and stuff. So you understand him, and you're afraid of him, and you get to laugh. He gets to put on he puts on a performance in a way that like the character also puts on a performance. He has some he's almost like a peacock in a way. Sometimes he gets to strut his stuff a little bit, and that's pretty cool to see from Chris Hemsworth in this role. And He really lets loose, and I would say that's enough reason to see the movie. Additionally, the film has good action sequences. Personally don't know if I feel like that they're on par with Fury Road, but if I had to choose, I think I would choose Fury Road over some of the scenes here. Although they are very good. They're good, well shot. The cinematography is very very good. And I think the other thing about this movie that's really cool that I appreciate is the world building. And just if you go from Fury Road to here, you get a sense of other towns. Other places exist. They're mentioned, or you catch glimpses of them. But this movie really gives you get to see them a little bit, and it's not a ton of detail. You don't need. I don't think you need that. It doesn't give us that. But what it does give us is a sense of how sprawling the wasteland. There's the wasteland area, and like in the world they live in, and how there are other groups of people also trying to do what they can to survive in this world. And it's cool to hit other spots. It makes the story feel bigger, and that was cool. The other thing I actually liked about it, I was hoping that it didn't give us too much on the green place. I liked that there was a bit of a mystery to it. In Fury Road, you see the remnants of it, but you never really see it in its prime. And the implication of a prequel suggests that you would get to see the green place at some point in its prime, particularly because we're seeing a young Furiosa growing into who we know her to be. We would have seen her living life, enjoying the fruits, the prosperity of the green place. But I'm glad you don't see too much of that. It gives you just a taste, and that's cool, because I think it retains, for me anyway, it retains a sense of it retains what I imagined it to be. It's like if I read a book about the green place, a novel. If this was a novel, or even if Fury Road was a novel, and I got to imagine what the green place was, I like what I imagined it to be better than actually seeing it and having it sort of having my mental picture be somewhat distorted. The other thing that was cool about this movie is the transition from young Furiosa, like child Furiosa, to older Furiosa was pretty seamless. I think it was amazing how it was done. You can't tell where, like most movies would do it, where you would see the kid version and then have some cutaways or some montages or whatever, and then you see the prime version, who we were going to follow throughout the rest of the story. This movie does a supreme job at having the transition feel so seamless. You almost feel like you're growing with the character through these touchstone points in her evolution. That was endlessly cool to me. Now, having said all of this, I don't know that the prequel justified itself as necessary, at least in this format. I'll explain. So, my problem with prequels is that, one, the biggest issue I think for me about certain prequels is that they can take away the mystique a little bit of a story. There's something to be said for leaving certain details up for interpretation, up for imagination. You think of the old films, like Golden Age films, or even silent era films, or whatever. I'm thinking of something like The Invisible Man, for instance, from Universal, the 1930s version. Now, the story gives you pretty much everything you need to know to understand what's going on in the story as we are watching it. A prequel, I don't know, I feel like they would have taken away from the allure of it. And I think what I mean to say is that some of those older films You don't have prequels popping up and down from these old movies. The story is the story, and that's all you get. That's all you get. Everything else you get to imagine and have a headcanon about it. And I think there's something cool about that. Personally, this is not to say that prequels are whack, because there are some good ones. Say what you will about George Lucas and the Star Wars prequels. They have a consistent vision, and whatever your issues are with them, they were true to what the story that Lucas was telling. That's endlessly commendable for me personally, as a person who's appreciating these stories. You can argue that some element of Darth Vader's backstory is demystified a little bit by the fact that he did that, but that was always his intent, to tell those stories in the way he wanted to. So I'm with it. And I think even with the prequels movies, it actually what it ends up doing is deepening Vader as a character, because you get to see his progression from young slave boy to intense Jedi Knight to Sith Lord. And the depth that you get is pretty cool. The issue, I think, comes in with certain prequels is when you have a story and it doesn't really add any depth. It feels like it gives us other details that are interesting, but are not necessary. With Furiosa as a character, the movie gives us, I think Fury Road gives us enough juice to understand who she is as a character, what her goals are, why she's doing what she's doing, and why she's holding such trauma. And that's really enough. You don't need to know how she lost her arm. There's something kind of cool about not knowing. So I guess what I'm getting at is that was part of one of my biggest issues about even the announcement of this movie. I thought, why are you making a prequel to the character of Furiosa? The wasteland is so expansive. You mean to tell me there are no other characters you could tell stories about? There are tons of people out there who are probably struggling, who have other fights that they're doing, there are other skirmishes, other sort of battles with other warring communities and things that they've been fighting with for a peck of years, whatever it is, since the fall of civilization, whatever it is. There's tons of other people you could tell stories about. Why would you touch Furiosa? She was so well realized, I think, in Fury Road already, that personally, I don't think this movie gives us anything more to hang on the character. It doesn't make her any more interesting. It doesn't really add any more depth to her, for me personally. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that the movie sucks. So I think the movie actually is good. So, but I just that is an issue for me. I don't know that it was necessary. I read somewhere that it was going to be an anime or some other medium, and I feel like that this story would have been cool to see it in that form. I don't know, something about it feels like it would be less. It would encroach less into the space of how Furious as a character was realized in Fury Road. To me, she was perfect. There's just enough there for us to follow her. There's some mystery and stuff there. We don't need to know every single solitary detail about a character. I kind of like that certain things are mysterious. You look at Max, we can infer things about Max based on what the films give us, but we don't know all of his backstory. We don't know everything. And that's kind of cool. There's something cool about that. You look at the No Name trilogy. Clint Eastwood's character in those movies. He's a dude doing stuff, going from town to town, righting wrongs and junk, right? You don't know his backstory. I don't know that you need to. Would you want to know that? I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't want to. I think the Dollars trilogy is perfect from a character perspective. I don't think you need to know anything about. You don't need to know anything more than what we got. You just need to know what's he doing, what his needs, what his wants, what's the goal, and then you just follow the story. I don't know. That's just my opinion. So I don't know that there always necessarily needs to be a need for stories that take place prior to main stories that we know. I think a good case too is Rogue One. That's a fantastic movie that does not really, you see Vader and you see Grand Moff Tarkin, but it doesn't spend a ton of time with characters that we already know. I think the genius of that story is that we're following people who there are pockets in the story that we got that you can say, okay, who are the people who helped put this in motion? And you tell a story about them. And I think that was great. It's fantastic. Same thing with Solo. I think Solo is not that great, but there are characters in that movie. If you've seen the movie, Woody Harrelson, Tandy Wade Newton, and that group. That's a movie. That's a separate movie. You could have told the story from those characters' perspectives. I think that would have been a much more engaging film because we don't know anything about them. I think having a movie built around them would be kind of cool. We know Han Solo already. That's the other thing. Solo I don't think was necessary as a spin-off story because Han Solo was fully realized already in the first time we meet him. We know who this guy is. I don't think you need to know anything more. And similarly, Furiosa I would put in that same camp. You don't need to know all these other things about it. I think the other thing that I appreciate about the fact that we did get to see child Furiosa and see her develop is you get to see some of the women from the Green Place and how the implication, the suggestion is that, they're well trained to protect that place. And that's cool to see them do that kind of stuff. But again, it's not something that we hadn't seen in Fury Road. They were already, we saw women who were doing heck of serious things, who, these are veterans, people who've lived, who knew the Green Place, who, did what they could to protect it. They just, everything just shifted and the ecosystem, whatever, betrayed them and they had to find a different place. Furiosa, the movie, gives us little pieces of that. You get to see how serious Furiosa's mom was. And that's kind of cool. That's cool to see. But other than that, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's necessary. We don't need to see it. That's just my 2 cents. Aside from that, at the end of the day, this is a movie I think that's worth watching. Don't go in expecting it to be like Fury Road. I think thematically, obviously, they're linked in that way too, outside of just the story of Furiosa and how she came to be or whatever it is. I think also you might see visual cues that are similar and that really punch up, particularly during some of the action sequences. They're really tight, very good, very strong action sequences. And I rewatched some parts of Fury Road recently after having seen Furiosa, and it's just you get to see the flavor is there, the electricity is there, and you see that across both movies. It pops. It still it has there's a kinetic energy to the scenes, and I think if nothing else, it's going to be a fun watch. It'd almost be like a theme park ride but there's some depth too. I think everyone brings something to it that really make it richer than just a bunch of action. Anya Taylor-Joy really sells it, and Chris Hemsworth is great. I feel like I would have liked to have seen the movie just really be about those two characters. Although what we get is okay too. I'll leave it there because I'm curious to see what other people think about the movie. Yeah, I did like it, and it's worth a watch. So that's all I'll say on that. I know we're behind the 8 ball on new releases, but here we are. This is the if you're still here after all this blabbing, thank you for your time. I appreciate you watching the video. Come on back. More reviews coming up pretty soon. Meantime, I gotta go. Take it easy.